Could you tell us a bit about EdgeTier?
Our kind of goal is to really make all the data in customer support accessible and usable.
Would you have been someone who was at the forefront of that selling?
I don't see how you can do it any other way at the start. I think the founders have to be completely involved in the commercial side of it.
And when you are scaling EdgeTier and you're kind of building the teams, what have been some of the biggest challenges when it comes to that?
Most of the challenges are down to people and personnel. Like most of the challenges are down to getting that right.
What do you look for in people?
The biggest thing is like ownership and proactiveness.
The best advice in business you've received?
As a startup, one of the most important things you need to figure out and measure is like, what's your time to value? Like, how quickly can you demonstrate value to a customer?
Last year you guys raised, was it 6 million in your Series A?
Yeah, just over 6. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
And what has been the plan since then?
So now it's about scaling, right? So we demonstrated a very clear kind of sales process, a very clear go-to-market. The product appetite is very strong. So it's really about just scaling that as much as possible.
Bart, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me.
You're a hard man to track down, but I got you
we got there in the
end. I guess first of all, for any listeners that don't know, could you tell us a bit about EdgeTier?
Sure. So EdgeTier software company primarily. Our kind of goal is to really make all the data in customer support accessible and usable, right? So we use a lot of AI, a lot of machine learning to help understand what's going on in conversations, to monitor the tens of thousands of interactions that are going on, use that to feed back to the rest of the organization to find what customers like, what they dislike, what agents are doing, what emerging trends are happening, and then also use that data to help the team respond quicker, respond faster, be more efficient. So really kind of using that AI as a helping hand in pretty much every aspect of customer support.
Okay, very good. And where did the idea come from?
So we've a bit of a meandering past. We originally started in a very different space. So myself, Shane and Kieran are the three founders of the company. We originally started with building an app for like mobile phone monitoring and usage and stuff like that. That was, in hindsight, a terrible idea. But we kind of got into customer care because a lot of our backgrounds are in data science. So Shane and I both did like PhDs in machine learning. So we were quite data kind of focused. And we just saw like lots of opportunity to use the data in customer support organizations, to use it for something better than just responding to a customer and then forgetting about it and not leaving it or not doing anything with it.
Yeah.
So we started originally doing a lot of pure consultancy projects where we just go into customer care organizations and say, hey, look, we can help you understand your data, make sense of it. And then from that, we started to bring out kind of product ideas, and ultimately we pitched a few of these ideas to some of the customers we were working with. And they said, yeah, look, if you build that, we'll buy it. And that's kind of where we went from.
Very good. So it was an idea, and then a lot of different iterations of that idea.
Yeah.
So a lot of pivoting throughout that journey.
Yeah, like pivoting on the technology. So pivoting on like what it does and adding new features and changing things. I mean, there was a fairly big pivot away from like telecommunication space very early, but even within customer care, pivots in terms of like adding new functionality, adding new features and changing directions a bit. And also pivots in terms of like go-to-market strategy. Like, how are we actually going to sell this? How do we, we might have the best product in the world, but if we can't get it in front of people and get it, people using it, it's kind of useless. So we did a lot of thinking about how we can actually make it as easy as possible to get our technology into people's hands, and use that because we saw that as a bit of a barrier. We saw like, okay, we have this great product that customers really like, but it's a big project, it's a big deployment to get it into their contact center. And when they use it, it's great, but it's a big, stepping stone to get there. Whereas we've kind of changed a lot of the way we go to market now, where we can actually start very small. We can start with this one component that sits in, doesn't require any real integration, just sits in and starts working. And then we can, demonstrate value very, very quickly. And then, we can kind of go from there. So we changed not only in terms of our technology, but also in terms of our go-to-market quite a lot.
Very good. And what was, I guess, in those early days in terms of the strategy and the go-to-market? Obviously, would you have been someone who was at the forefront of that selling, getting in front of clients and customers?
Yeah, so definitely. So I don't see how you can do it any other way at the start. I think the founders have to be completely involved in the commercial side of it, completely involved in talking to customers. We would have done a lot and still do a lot of like customer interviews, just very like, unstructured conversations where you're just looking at discussing pain points, you're just looking at finding problems and doing those things not in a sales kind of way, right?
Yeah.
So we've done a lot of those in the early days and still try to do them as much as possible now. And then, yeah, so like naturally that kind of leads on to then commercial discussions and commercial things as you start to kind of uncover pains.
Yeah.
But yeah, we'd focused a lot on founders being involved in that commercial process. Now it's a little bit of a different story. Now it's a case of, moving us away from that as much as possible and getting good people in so that they can lead the commercial discussions and lead all of that, which we're doing. But yeah, in the early days, I think it was very, very important for us to have founders involved in that process.
Yeah. Now it's about, I guess, building the team who can do that.
Yeah.
Have you looking at your past, your background, your experience, would you have always had that kind of leadership element? Would you feel like you're a leader of people or a strong people manager?
I think I'm learning a lot as I go. This is, and it's for all of us, like every few months, it's the biggest team we've ever led because we're adding more people to it. So I'm definitely learning a lot as I go. I always enjoy working with people. I mean, I don't think it's naturally a pure leadership thing. I just enjoy working with people. And once you have good people on board, everything is kind of easy.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, I don't have a style or an ethos that I kind of really follow too much. Other than
Mm-hmm.
leading by example, making sure that you keep your bar as high as possible and you hire people that will try and raise that bar for you.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's definitely an area that we're learning in and pushing ourselves in.
Very good. And I guess funding and having the capital there to invest in people and grow is so important. And last year you guys raised, was it 6 million in your Series A?
Yeah, just over 6. Yeah.
Very good.
Yeah.
And what has been the plan since then?
So it's scale, right? So like we weren't in a bad position when we raised the Series A. Like we were making good revenue. We were growing quite fast. And it was a bit of a tough market to raise over the last year or two. So you kind of need that. So now it's about scaling, right? So we demonstrated a very clear kind of sales process, a very clear go-to-market. The product appetite is very strong. So it's really about just scaling that as much as possible.
Yeah.
Scaling both in terms of commercially, so we're generating more leads, we're going to bring more people in. But also, technically, like we have to change bits of our infrastructure to go from, one set of customers to another set. So it's really about scaling at kind of everything that we're doing. And in getting all those processes in place, getting all those things in place that allows us to do that without, founders being involved in every kind of step of the way.
Yeah, exactly.
Getting there.
And I guess, did you find it very encouraging that you are able to raise that amount, as you say, in such a difficult market condition?
Yeah, like we knew we were in a decent position, I'd say, and we probably wouldn't have went out without doing that. So like for us, we knew the market was a bit of a tough market last year, and like obviously raising money is a long enough process. So we only went out when we were quite confident that we'd be able to raise. So we focused on getting to profitability, getting to break even, so that we weren't like we didn't have like 4 months runway and we were kind of under pressure to raise. So we got ourselves into a position where we knew our metrics were quite strong. We knew our revenues were strong. We weren't beating down the door to take on cash.
Yeah.
Which I think was quite important, and it definitely took a lot of pressure off the raise because it meant we could be a bit more casual about it almost and not be as forced. But yeah, in that journey, found some really good investors that we really liked. Really enjoyed kind of working with them. Enjoyed the, even in the diligence process and even in that, like it was always very good kind of working with them, and they were always very, smart in their observations and clear in what they expected and things like that. So we found that process quite good. But yeah, it's definitely a difficult market. I mean, every investor said like, well, if this was this time 2 years ago, you'd be raising a lot more and you'd be doing all that. Like, so that was always kind of there. But no, overall we found it a good process. But yeah, we were confident enough in where we were as a business.
Yeah, you felt like you could back it up. And in terms of, let's say, a first-time founder now who's looking to raise capital in this current environment, what would your advice be to them?
Well, I think the bar is definitely a bit higher. So I think the bar is a little bit higher in terms of the proof points that you need, right? It obviously depends on what stage you're at, right? So if you're at a very early stage, you're just starting out, it's probably going to be more about you than any proof points you have, right? So like at the very early stage, they're investing in people. And actually a lot of the early stage investments, that's actually the market is still, I think, holding up quite well. Pre-seed and seed investments are, I think, holding up reasonably well. So at that stage, it's really about showing that you can achieve something, showing that you will use the capital well and you'll use it efficiently, and that the idea is reasonably solid. As you progress to kind of seed and Series A, then it obviously becomes a lot more about the metrics, and it becomes a lot more about revenue growth and what you're doing. Yeah. I think we chose well our investors along the way. Like in our seed round, Episode 1 led us, who are a UK VC firm, Actor, an Irish firm. But Episode 1 are very focused on seed, and naturally at that stage they're very focused on like product and product. Like they're not going to beat you up if the revenue isn't as high as maybe everyone would like. Yeah. You know, they're focused on, is the product right? Is the positioning right? Where is this going? As you move towards Series A and you start to get ready to raise a Series A and go into Series A and beyond, then naturally it becomes more about the metrics, and naturally it becomes more about growth rate and CAC to LTV ratio and all those other kind of things that you need to take into account. Yeah. But yeah, we were quite lucky, I think, in that we had a very seed specialist company leading the round, and they were able to really put structure on the kind of board meetings and put structure on the direction of the company to be about the product, about getting the product right, so that if we needed to twist and turn, we were kind of given that freedom to do that, and we weren't like, okay, this is the path, you just need to execute more sales now. It was definitely a more flexible kind of approach.
A bit more freedom now.
Yeah.
Very good. And in those earlier days, when it comes to the support you get from, Enterprise Ireland or even the Irish government, do you feel like there's an adequate amount of support there for startups like EdgeTier?
I think Enterprise Ireland are great. I think they do a lot of good things, and we did a few programs with them. They are obviously an investor in us as well, from the previous rounds. So I think they put a lot of supports in place, and generally they're pretty good. I mean, you'll go to 5 events, maybe 3 or 4 of them are excellent, and there's not everything is going to be perfect. There's definitely more in terms of allowing more people to invest back in. I mean, some of the UK schemes around investments make it a lot easier to get early stage capital, and make it a lot easier for, I think there is now in Ireland quite a good cohort of people who have exited companies and would like to be reinvesting back into earlier stage companies. That seems to be a lot easier in the UK than it is in Ireland, so that's definitely something that would could be improved. But yeah, so overall, Enterprise Ireland have been great, very supportive, and even now as we've grown, they're looking to support us in other ways.
Yeah. Do you think Ireland then, as a nation, or even like a tech startup ecosystem, do you feel like we're overachieving, underachieving for the size and what we have?
I think we naturally, Irish companies hit a bit of a ceiling. There's a lot of Irish companies who get to somewhere between 50 and 100 million in valuation, and then go for an exit and get it early. I mean, there's been some big ones in Cubic Telecom. That was a huge one recently, which is great to see. But yeah, I think there is a natural bit of a ceiling, and maybe we need a few companies to go well beyond that to kind of show how it's done a little bit. It's obviously great to see companies like Stripe, really go to the moon, and we can't really claim them, but it's good. It's still nice to see Irish people at the helm. But yeah, I do think there's a little bit of a ceiling there that I think we need to kind of push through. So we need to be able to, push well beyond that ceiling to show what's possible and what's feasible. Yeah.
Yeah, very good. And when you are scaling EdgeTier and you're kind of building the teams, what have been some of the biggest challenges when it comes to that?
I think, in the early days, every hire is like crucial, right? Yeah. So like it's definitely been hard to draw the line under some hires very early and just say like, look, this isn't working out and you're not the level we need to be. I mean, that's always a really, really difficult thing to do. And especially like for us, it was our first time doing that kind of stuff, right? So that's always really tricky. Most of the challenges are down to people and personnel. Like most of the challenges are down to getting that right, interviewing right, getting the right people in place, giving them enough leeway to, so that they're able to lead and do the right thing, but also being close enough to them to make sure that, it's done in the right way, because you're very conscious as a founder. You have so much knowledge of everything from customers to the product to everything, right? Yeah. So most of the challenges are around scaling teams, like getting the right people in place, getting them on board, being aggressive enough in interviewing and hiring process, but also making sure that you're not like, waiting for some unicorn and waiting for some person who's going to be able to do everything. So yeah, they're the things that we will always kind of find challenging.
Do you feel like remote work then has affected building those teams?
Only a little. I think it's harder. Remote is way harder for junior people, right? So like when you're starting your career, and there's cohort of people who have come out of college either like during COVID or just before, just after, where they've never really worked in a full-time office environment, and maybe they don't see some of the benefits of that. They don't really see the benefit in like the overheard conversation or the overheard sales pitch and all of that kind of thing. So I think in the early part of people's career, it is quite important to try and be in the office as much as possible and try and, I think it can hinder your career.
Yeah.
People with experience, not so much. I think people who've got a few years of experience and they know what they're doing, I don't think remote hinders them at all. I think, they'll work quite well in those environments. And we're relatively so we have an office in Dublin. We've a bunch of people in Spain as well, and there's a few people kind of scattered around Ireland. So we're relatively remote as a company, and by that nature, we have to be kind of remote first. So any meetings have to be done as if they're remote.
Yeah.
But yeah, it is nice when there's a bit of a buzz around the office when people come in, and you can kind of feel that energy a bit more. That you don't, particularly now because I lead the commercial team. People will hang up a bad sales call and they'll kind of just slump to themselves in the room on their own. It's a little bit, sad compared to you're in the office and everyone's kind of going, look, don't worry about it. It was a bit of a tough one, but sure, the next one will be good,
Yeah.
So I do think that kind of buzz around the office can be great.
Yeah, no, it's definitely important for that collaboration piece. What about yourself then? Do you enjoy like working from home? Would you prefer to be in an office, or do you think hybrid is the way forward? Or?
I loved it. Like I've a couple of kids, so I love the flexibility of hybrid. It means I can get home early some days and do stuff like that. Hybrid is great for me. 3 days in the office, that's what I kind of tend to do. 3 to 4, but yeah, so I like the mix. But yeah, definitely get to spend a little bit of time with the kids is nice. I know my wife would say I don't spend enough, but yeah, definitely it's good to do that.
That's definitely a plus. Do you find then, in terms of yourself being in a co-founder leadership position, who do you lean on, when it comes to making tough decisions? Or do you have a mentor or a coach or a career coach or just people within the industry?
Yeah, so I've always been very conscious of limitations. So, I don't think anyone will claim or should claim that they know everything. So, sometimes maybe people look to a founder to think that they should be able to do everything, but it's just not really feasible. So we make use a lot of in EdgeTier of like external people that we feel are just good in certain areas.
Yeah.
We worked for a long time with Caelan King, who kind of acts as a kind of a mentor advisor in a few areas. The impact he's had has been huge, and just he's somebody who's built and scaled a company before, and is able to see the challenges that we were about to hit and kind of advise us on those. So we got a lot of benefit from that. And now, even as I'm kind of heading up the commercial team, which my background is mostly tech, right? So leading the commercial team is definitely new. We work with guys like Ben Miller, who was kind of put onto us from our investors in the UK, as just again somebody who's built and managed large sales organizations 5 times in the past. And again, it's just great to have that someone to bounce those ideas off, to either tell you it's the stupidest idea ever or tell you actually it's kind of okay and it makes sense. So yeah, we use them a lot and I think get a lot of value out of them.
Yeah, no, that is very important. Do you find, having a tech background and, as you say now, running commercial teams, have you figured out what you're not good at?
I think, well, I'm bad at marketing. I know that. So we've definitely brought in marketing people who are far better than me. I think we've had to do a lot of thinking about the structure of our sales organization and how it should work, and a lot of experimentation. I think I'm quite good at that piece of it, of like trying things and testing them out and seeing what works and getting to a point where it's good enough and you're confident enough that it's the right way to go, and then kind of pushing on it. So I think we do that quite well. Like I said, some of the management parts of it, as the team is growing, it's every week it's the biggest team I've ever managed. So there's definitely parts of that I try to educate myself on and kind of learn about. Obviously in the past, we were fairly naive commercially at the start. Like I remember the first time we ever sold something, we had a call with the guy, and we were like, he was like, yeah, okay, let's do it. We'll agree to this price, whatever. And we were like, high five and great. And then we looked at each other and go like, how does this work now? Like, do we send him a PO or an invoice? Or how does the money get from his account into my account? We were like, we had no idea what to do. So we had to Google, how do you get money from a business kind of a thing? So we were really green, at the very, very start. Now we know what to do, thankfully, so we're not too bad. But so like we're always up for kind of taking that advice on and realizing our limitations and bringing people on board.
Yeah. Did you have a moment, in those early days that was probably the most difficult moment of, running a startup when you look back? Could you pinpoint anything?
Well, I remember we did, so in the original thing, which was a piece of technology that like ran simulations on mobile phone usage, right? Our kind of idea was we'd sell it to telcos. And we ended up licensing that technology to the communications regulator. And so we had a massive project to do to get that ready to give to them. So I remember that being just a period of like 3 months where it was like literally 16-hour days every day trying to get it done. It was over Christmas as well. And I think I took Christmas Day off, and it was the only day we took off over that whole period. And we were all like working really, really hard to get it done. Because at that stage, it was like either this project gets done or the company falls. Like it was kind of that binary, right?
Yeah.
So that was a really, really tough period. I remember being really stressed out, and there was a lot of work there. Yeah. So that was probably the most make or break kind of period.
Yeah.
Other than that, been all plain sailing. So, happy out, handy out.
Nothing's gone wrong at all.
Yeah, no, nothing.
Do you, I don't know, do you walk into a room, as you say, every week, every month, you're managing the largest team you've managed? Do you ever walk into a room and kind of that imposter syndrome kind of sinks in and, the nerves kick in, or do you have a way to deal with that?
Yeah, definitely. And actually, one of the things, coincidentally, we've hired just more people in Dublin over the last kind of couple of months. So like, actually the team's been kind of, getting bigger over the last while, but because some of them were in Spain and some of them were, in Galway or Cork or whatever, you didn't notice it as much. But then now you kind of go into the office and there's, a load of people there. You're like, oh, wow, yeah, these people are, in the company.
Yeah.
I never massively had imposter syndrome. Obviously, like, I'm totally aware of my limitations, right? Yeah. Or at least I think I am. So like, and you try and work on them and you realize you're not going to be good at everything. Yeah. But I've never had a massive imposter syndrome or feeling like, I wasn't able to do something. I'm definitely relatively confident in my abilities, but definitely strange to see so many people in the office and in the company, which is it's good.
Yeah, I'd say, like, as you say, kind of when you put your hands up and you know what your limitations are and where your weaknesses are, then it might not slip in. And if you're confident, it probably slips in less, whereas maybe if you're less confident, when you're scaling and growing, which you have been, what do you look for in people who you want to invest in and bring on the journey with you?
Probably the biggest thing is like ownership and proactiveness. Like I think they're actually quite rare things in people for people to be, able to give somebody a job and they just completely own it and will say like, it does, like, I will either get this done or I will tell you if there's a problem and I will, but I'll own it. Which is kind of important for us now because we're, like I said, we're growing so fast, we're adding customers on, very, very quickly. We need people to own those like tasks or own those items or own those jobs to make sure they get done. So that's a really key thing that we're looking for. The old adage like smart and get things done, that's still holds true. Like they're the two values that you're looking for people most.
Yeah.
So like, people who are just going to be able to get a job done, that's really, that's really important.
Yeah. People with, who are going to hold themselves accountable, as you say, and
look
after stuff. As you then grow as, a founder, a leader within tech, what's some of the best advice in business you've received?
That's a good question. You get lots of advice. I remember being like at the very start, like one of the things we did when we started out was like try to talk to as many people as possible who'd done it. And it's actually nice. Like, I mean, the community is good. People are always willing to give advice and things like that. It's always, after a while, you kind of realize actually it's really hard to give proper advice if you only just meet somebody for 30 minutes. Like, so that's one of the reasons why we started to kind of invest in mentors who like get involved in the business a little bit and would know it. One bit of advice actually that I don't know who gave it to me, but I use it all the time was I was talking to someone about like providing value for customers and things like that. And he kept hammering on about time to value. And actually as a startup, one of the most important things you need to figure out and measure is like, what's your time to value? Like how quickly can you demonstrate value to a customer?
Yeah.
Because, like a big company can ride on their name, they'll get in there and it might take them a year to provide value and that's fine for them. But for a startup, you're always like, people looking at you like, who are these guys? Who are this company? we've never heard of them before. What are they actually going to do for us?
Yeah.
So that's something that we focus on a lot now, is like, how do we demonstrate value as quickly as possible? And that could be like during the sales process, where we're actually like helping them, just giving them advice on things that we think are right, even if they're not really in our benefit.
Yeah.
But also in terms of how we deploy our technology, to make sure when we're deploying it, we're able to show value in the first week, as opposed to, we'll do a 6-month rollout and then we'll see where we get to.
Yeah.
So that unnamed person, that was definitely a thought that kind of stuck in my head a lot.
So time to value. Obviously, I think you even said a word there, time. How do you manage your time as a founder? You're probably getting stretched, you're getting pulled right, left, you're getting advice off everyone. How do you say no?
Really, really badly, I think. On my limitations, this is definitely one of them. So like it's hard to balance that now, particularly because we're in that stage where, I work with a lot of our customers, so I'm working with them day to day, and there's always demands there, there's always needs there, but at the same time, we're trying to build a team and we're trying to build a company and doing that. So there's definitely a lot going on. The only real way is to get good people to do good things, right? So the only real way is to hire smart, hardworking people, get them on your team, empower them to do good jobs. That's really the only way. Once you're confident that they can do something better than you, you're happy. You don't even need to think about it anymore. That's the only real way. As you know, with the podcast and arranging this podcast, it's hard to nail me down a little bit. But yeah, that's the only real way I can think to do it. Yeah. Then kind of try to segment time. Try not to. I used to like ruin every weekend because I'd be like, I have to get these 5 things done. Yeah. And I still do, but I say, okay, I'm going to get them done between these 3 hours, and I'm not going to think about them for the rest of the weekend.
Yeah.
So just trying to time box things a little bit, I find helps.
Prioritize in terms then of not even work life, family life. Obviously, you mentioned there having kids.
Yeah.
How do you switch off? Do you get home and you're still on the phone, opening the laptop, going on holidays, still opening the laptop, or do you kind of have a cut-off time where you're like, right now I need to switch off?
I'm desperate for switching off, but I do. So my kids play sports, so I coach their teams, which is like going out into a pitch with like 60 kids is a good way to switch off. You can't really be thinking about work too much.
Nothing else to think about.
So that's actually a really nice. Like, you completely have to forget about everything because you're trying to do a session and you're organizing things and you're coaching things and stuff like that. So I actually find that a really nice way to kind of break it, because you'll come home from work, you'll go straight to a training session and you'll chat with the coaches and get it set up and work away. Yeah. So that's a really nice way to kind of switch off. So I enjoy doing that.
Yeah, no, I do the same as well. I'm a coach, and so as soon as it gets to whatever it is, 6:30, I'm like, too many crazy kids to look after. Worry about work. What's something maybe you believe in that others generally don't agree with?
That's a really tough question. I'm too conformist here now. I just go along with the crowd. I do. I don't know if this is a controversial thing. I do think like startups, people say you can do it without working hard. Like, I don't think that's possible. I don't think it's possible to make a startup without being kind of obsessed by it. Yeah. I just don't think it is. Or I don't think it's possible to run a large company without being obsessed by it either. I just think it kind of has to be. It has to be there. And everybody I know that's run any sort of a substantial size company or any sort of a successful company, they're completely obsessed by it. And they mightn't say it, but they're like morning, noon, and night kind of thinking about it.
Yeah.
So I think I don't know if that's a controversial opinion or not. I also I read a book recently that kind of changed my opinion on feedback and how to manage people. So like, as part of my kind of manage more people, and there's a book called Radical Candour, which I really liked, which is really about like how to give really good direct feedback to people.
Yeah.
And not fall into this kind of what it says like ruinous empathy, where you're like skirting around issues and like afraid to be direct and tell somebody that they're doing something wrong because you don't want them to feel sad or feel bad. So I think that's a really good philosophy for kind of interacting with people, just to be like uber direct. If it's not good, just say it in as direct a way as you can without skirting around the issue, as opposed to trying to be nice and polite, because as long as you care about that person, as long as you have their best interests at heart, that's the best way to kind of give feedback. Yeah, more on the kind of radical transparency. Yeah, exactly, yeah.
Do you find you've evolved over time? Do you find that if someone isn't doing performing in the role as well as they should. Maybe in the past, would you have been a bit softer, not softer, but less direct than you are now?
Yeah, 100%.
Yeah. And did you just learn over time from, or as you said, kind of leaning into reading books like that? And
we made
others?
We made some, I wouldn't say bad hires or bad people, but in the early days we definitely mishired a few times. And it was obvious early on that it was the wrong thing, but we were like, like the probation 6 months, we'll give it another month and we'll see, give it another month and then we'll see, sure, we'll keep it off. And then it's like 5.5 months in and you're like, okay, well, we need to call it now. So we definitely learned from those, just to be really direct about it. Think about a person after a month, do a mental check in your head. Do they deserve to work for another month and so on, and kind of do that. And really just be kind of forcing yourself to confront the kind of niggles in the back of your mind.
Yeah.
So yeah, I definitely learned from mistakes there and definitely evolved in terms of approach and thinking. And most people will pull through once you're very direct at the early stage of what they need to do. They'll be fine. They'll adjust course if they're good, and they'll figure it out. Definitely evolved a lot and made some awkward conversations in the past, I'd say, or seek to avoid.
Yeah, well, at least you've learned from, and I think a lot of companies and people are guilty of, as you say, kind of dragging it along rather than just nipping it in the bud.
Which is completely understandable. Like, nobody likes those conversations. They're really awkward. It's hard to give someone direct feedback where you're, telling them that something isn't quite good enough or isn't quite right. It's a hard thing to do.
What does the next, let's say, 18 months look like for EdgeTier?
So everything's about scale now. So scaling everything, right? So we're putting the foundations in place now, and we have been, on a commercial team, bringing lots of people on board. Obviously, when you expand a team like that, there's a certain ramp period and things like that. So we're in the midst of that now. We've got a pretty strong team in place now who are delivering results, and now it's a case of scaling that even more and making sure that we can kind of double down on that. For us as well, we've always had a go-to-market of kind of pure outbound, so we're looking at different channels now as well to kind of accelerate that kind of growth even more. And then scaling the technical teams as well. So like everything is about scaling at the minute. That's all we're thinking about. We know we have a really strong product. We see the benefit it has in customers. We see the impact it has really, really early on in customers.
Yeah.
So it's really about getting that out to as many people as possible, telling as many people about it, and making sure that we can onboard and support all those people as they come on board.
Very good. And do you think that far ahead? Do you have what would your end goal be?
There isn't really one other than keep growing.
Yeah.
And that sounds really like I'm avoiding the question, but it generally is the answer. Like we've one thing I have learned about myself, we're and I think it's the same for Shane and Kieran as founding groups. Like I don't, and this is a sad thing to say, I don't think we're ever going to be happy. Like I think if we'd have looked back on the company 4 years ago and went back 2 years before that, we would have been like, there's no way we'll get to that side. We'd be so happy if we were where we were 4 years ago. And then you could say the same thing about 2 years ago and so on. So I don't think we'll ever be quite happy with where we are. I think we'll always be looking at, well, how can we make this bigger, or how can we double down on that, and how can we push that more?
Yeah.
So generally don't think in terms of, let's get it to this size and then that'll be it.
Yeah.
That's not really the way we think. It's always about, okay, well, there's a challenge in going from, no customers to one customer. Then there's a challenge going from 1 to 5. Then there's a challenge going from 5 to 30. And then there's a challenge going from 30 to 300. They're all different challenges that you want to solve.
Yeah.
So we always kind of think in that way. That's kind of the way we approach it. So I think when we're at 300 customers, we'll be going, okay, well, we need to get to 3,000 now, and we won't be too happy until we do.
Yeah.
Which is I don't think that's a good way of thinking for your mental health.
I think it's usually a trait, isn't it, of every kind of good entrepreneur? How can we make it better? Of course, when you reflect on the last 5 years and where you were then and where you are now, you'll be quite happy, but you'll never be,
Yeah. Why can't I be happy, Martin? That's what I'm saying.
I'm content. I can put my feet up and finish now.
Yeah.
So you'll keep driving forward. So I think that's definitely a good trait.
Oh, yeah. Take your word for it.
You say with half a smile. We usually finish the pod with a couple of quick fire questions.
Okay.
So I'll just shoot them at you. So first one is something you wish you did earlier in your career.
In my career, I'd like to have traveled more. I traveled a lot with work, but I never lived somewhere else. I should have done that. Yeah. So hopefully we'll get to do that at some point.
Yeah. Okay. So that's in the future now.
Yeah.
What's the most important risk you took and why?
Well, definitely starting a company. I started it, I think my second kid was about like 2 months old when we left my nice high paying job to start a company with an 80% pay cut. So that was definitely the biggest risk.
Yeah, worth the risk. You're nearly happy as well. So you're getting there. Who's your biggest inspiration?
Probably my dad. So my dad died about 9 years ago, but he started a technology company in Ireland in the 80s, which was not a very common thing to do at that time. So yeah, he would have been my biggest kind of career inspiration.
Very good, very good. And if you could read one book every year, what would it be?
Shane and Kieran always slag me about reading business books because they think I'm a bit of a nerd. I love the kind of startup books like Lean Startup and things like that, or Startup Owner's Manual, Steve Blank, those kind of books. I think they're great if you're, no matter what stage you're at, because they're just all about iterating and finding things. I'm a sucker for a good like pop sci book as well, like Selfish Gene and stuff like that. I always like those kind of books as well. So yeah, maybe something that sounds very nerdy now. I should have said something cooler.
No, it's better than it's not the kind of generic, just self-improvement book. So no, that's a good answer. Yeah. Someone Irish who you'd like to see on this podcast, let's say in the next episode, who would you love to see?
That's a good question.
Within technology.
With technology. I like what Bobby Healy's doing out with Mana. He was actually someone who, like in the early days of EdgeTier, he was CTO on CarTrawler. He was one of the kind of founders and so he was one of the early people who brought us into CarTrawler and gave us a bit of a shot at working with them. And I think some of the stuff he's doing with Man is really interesting as well. So yeah, he'd be a good guy to get on. Yeah, it's definitely an interesting space, and a great guy to get on. Yeah. But look, thanks for coming on the podcast. Thank you very much for having me. It's great to finally get you. Yeah. But I'm sure the listeners will have enjoyed the episode and look forward to seeing the journey and how it pans out with EdgeTier. Super. Thank you very much. Cheers.